wonder what the scene will be tonight in Boston. It should be absolutely crazy, crazy, crazy. You can imagine how hyped up everyone will be and ready to go. The Four Nations final goes tonight. You could not script it any better, folks. Canada, U.S., amidst tensions like never seen before amongst the two countries, of course, going on right now, certainly at least for Canada. For Canadians, it's a tense situation in light of what's happened since Donald Trump has turned our world basically upside down, or he's trying to do so, with his 51st state routine and the tariff talk and all that goes with it, and of course what happened in the last game between the United States and Canada, as there were three fights. One started even before the puck dropped, with the Kachucks going at it, of course. So lots on the line, more for Canada, I would say, than the United States. One of the questions that I will ask you to weigh in on is, will you watch tonight? Are you going to watch this game, and what does it mean to you? Do you feel as though this is bigger than a hockey game? Is there more on the line than a hockey game? National pride at stake here. What are your thoughts on all of this? And who do you think will win? What are your predictions for the game tonight? I'll be watching, and I think it'll be, well, it's must watch. It's must watch hockey, really. Even if you're not a massive hockey fan or even a sport fan in general, this is something that I think will garner a lot of attention and a lot of eyeballs, and rightfully so. So that's one of the things that I'll ask you when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12. Will you watch the game tonight, Canada versus the U.S.? What are you expecting? And, of course, the national anthems. There'll be the debate over booing and all of that. To me, that whole storyline's getting pretty old. I mean, it is what it is. But I think as far as a spectacle goes, a sporting spectacle, this should be pretty darn good. And I will certainly watch it. And I will ask you the same thing. Will you watch, and what are your expectations? And where do you think this will rank when it comes to international hockey moments for Canada? Of course, some of the standouts, we'll go to the Summit Series, the 72 Summit Series with the Soviets and Paul Henderson's goal, Sidney Crosby's golden goal in Vancouver. There have been some other Canada Cups, but this could potentially rank right up there with all of them. So, yeah, this is something that I'll ask you to talk about. Also, you remember Rick's catchphrase, of course, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. Well, I would say that this is applicable when it comes to this story. A move by Nova Scotia's government to allow the Auditor General to be fired without cause is being described as a threat to the agency's watchdog role. A bill tabled this week would allow for dismissal of the auditor as long as 2/3 of the legislature agrees. And, of course, we know that the Houston government has 2/3, so for all intents and purposes, it would be a done deal. The government also moved to amend the Auditor General Act to establish a 2-week minimum timeline for the auditor to submit a report to the government before releasing it to the public. In addition, the bill would give the government the power to withhold Auditor General reports for reasons of public interest, they say, public safety or legal privilege. I mean, if this type of story doesn't outrage you, then you definitely aren't paying attention, and you don't care what's going on around you, as far as I'm concerned. This, to me, is an affront to democracy. The Auditor General's role is, no government would ever campaign on this. Can you imagine if the government was campaigning and said, if we win and we get a 2/3 election, we're going to do this? You would never do that because of the backlash and the blowback that it would receive, and rightfully so. Egregious is one of the adjectives that comes to mind to describe how I feel about all of this. The Auditor General, Kim Adair, will join the show tomorrow, by the way. She'll be speaking to the media later this morning. Busy morning for her. She'll join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock to kick the show off. But I think this is an absolute outrage. And you have to ask the question, what would the motivation for this be other than to use it? They wouldn't have gone out of their way to create this legislation and this bill if they weren't going to use it. And I think it's absolutely, as mentioned, egregious. So I'll get your take on this. Also, this in connection with the Four Nations final tonight, Canada versus U.S. A new poll suggests that more than a quarter of Canadians, 27%, now see the United States as an enemy country, while another 30% say they consider the U.S. an ally. This according to Leger poll. So I'll ask you the same question. Has your attitude towards Americans changed? Do you view them as an enemy at this point? And how far do you think might all of this go? So lots and lots to unpackage and lots to get to. We will open the phone lines between 11 and 12. Look forward to hearing from many of you, and they've got other things we can talk about as well. So thanks so much for tuning in and listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much, and like to thank, of course, Vanessa Van Ness on the other side of the glass at the control boards, doing a fine job as always. Now joining us for a chat is Peter Day, Nova Scotia Teachers Union President. Peter, thanks for joining the show.
Good morning, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Are you excited about the hockey tonight? Are you going to watch, or what are your thoughts on the Four Nations Cup final?
For the most part, I'm not really a big hockey fan, but listening to what you just said, I'm in full agreement. I want to tune in tonight because I think there's more at stake than just a hockey game.
I'll bet. Yeah, for sure. Any predictions?
I'm going to say Team Canada.
Yeah, what else are you going to say, right? The Americans are going to win. Yeah,
exactly.
That's right. Yeah, that's a loaded question for sure. Okay, so let's talk about a story that I read recently on the CBC website. Mount St. Vincent University is the latest post-secondary school in Nova Scotia to offer a condensed Bachelor of Education program to help address what the Teachers Union calls a dire shortage of educators across the province. The university announced last week it'll begin a 14-month option for students starting in May instead of September and have shorter holiday breaks. And Cape Breton University has introduced something similar as well. What are your thoughts on this?
To be honest, I can appreciate that the Mount is taking some action to address the teacher shortage. If you look at this program, it's a condensed timeline, right? So that's not affecting the qualifications or the course credit hours that are required to get the Bachelor of Education. What it's doing is it's just shortening the time that you're required to do it. So the 14-month program still has the exact same qualifications and course credit hours needed to have teachers, to put teachers back in the system. So it's an important piece of the puzzle to address our teacher shortage that we are feeling not only in Nova Scotia, but it's a national problem. So Nova Scotia needs to ensure that we have teachers coming into the system, and more importantly, we need to work on retaining the teachers that we have.
Right, so condensed meaning that there's not less curriculum; it's just simply taught in a shorter period of time. Breaks and holiday breaks and those types of things are not. That's all it is. No content is being left out.
No, and that's correct. It's just a shorter timeline, like you said. Shorter breaks. I know a lifetime ago when I took my education degree, there was parts of the schedule where we would have Fridays off. Right, so this timeline, I'm sure, doesn't allow for that. You mentioned the Cape Breton program. That's a program that was created for individuals who are already in the school system. So we're talking about our, educational assistants or our certificate teachers, like teachers who are out on the sub list because they have a bachelor's degree but don't have the Bachelor of Education. So that program was made to allow those students or to allow those potential teachers to become teachers, to do that while they're working. So again, the course requirements don't change. It's just a timeline.
All right. So what are the numbers looking like when it comes to teachers entering the system and the need and all of that? What are the numbers looking like statistically here? So
unfortunately, I'm not privy to the exact numbers. That's something that the Department of Education would have. But I can tell you that there are teacher shortages. Right now, there are positions that are not filled that have been advertised since September. We have teachers who have been hired for a position, let's say, as a early literacy resource, and they walked into school in September and were teaching a grade 1 class and are still in that position. Right. So there are positions that are not being filled, and it's a serious concern. Our most vulnerable students are the ones who are losing out on the resources that they need. As I mentioned, we have specialized teachers with caseloads that are far too high, and it affects the ability to meet the needs of those students.
All right, are these positions full-time positions? Are they term positions? Are they what describe the positions that have been posted not filled?
The easy answer to that is yes. It's all of those positions, right? And I mean, typically there are specialized positions, like we have our French, our math, music. Those are all specialized positions where you don't have or as a teacher you would need that type of training. In particular, we have our teacher specialists, such as our school psychologists, speech language pathologists, our school counselors. We're in dire need for those positions, and because of that, those positions are overwhelming. The caseloads are overwhelming. So there are different. Could be a 1-year term, could be permanent. The way that the contract works is, you start off with a 1-year term, and then you can go into a probationary contract and then a permanent contract. It's not just here you go, here's the contract and you're set for life. But there are different levels to that.
Okay, what are some ongoing issues when it comes to retention and all these challenges, and are we making any progress at all?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up retention, because retention is extremely important. As we know, teacher shortage is prevalent right across the nation. So we need to be able to keep the teachers that we have in the jobs that they're in. When you look at that, one of the things is the workload. We have teachers with class sizes which are getting to the point where it's unsustainable. Right, the complexities that are occurring in class, we haven't seen these levels in years. Our teachers are struggling to meet the needs of our students. So that's important. To address it, we really need the government to invest in our education. We need more resources, and when I say resources, I'm talking about time and I'm talking about human resources. Teachers need to have the time to develop the lessons so that they can meet the needs of the students in front of them. And right now, teachers are struggling to do that. Our specialists need to have the time to work with those students who have, whether it's gaps in their understanding or other complex issues, they need to have the time to work with those students. And with caseloads that are unmanageable, it's just not happening.
And that's just simply not enough hours for certain positions, or what's the issue here? Why are we in this position?
Well, I think it's, everybody can say there's not enough hours in the day, but as a teacher, if you're, you have a class that's well over the cap, you have complexities in your classroom, and you're trying to meet the needs of every student in front of you, teachers are struggling to do that. And it's the classroom. Schools are not the same as what they were when I started this gig 22 years ago. If you haven't been in a school in the last 5 years, really, you don't understand what's happening in our schools. The needs of our students have increased. We have mental health issues. We have language barriers. We have all kinds of concerns. And, teachers have always played the role of more than just a teacher. They play the role of a counselor, of a nurse, of a police officer. They do all of these other roles, and everything continuously gets downloaded onto our teachers. And we need to give them the time so that they can develop the lessons, so that they can address their students' needs, and give them a manageable workload so that the class in front of them, they can address all the individual needs, right?
Okay, are you anticipating that more universities will carry on with what Mount St. Vincent's done in Cape Breton University, expecting more of these types of accelerated programs? Well,
I mean, I don't see why they wouldn't. Right now, there's a need for teachers, and again, it's not just a need in Nova Scotia; it's a need right across the continent. To be frank, so there is. It's a supply and demand society, and there's definitely a demand for qualified teachers. So I wouldn't be surprised to see other universities jumping on board with this. And again, the key to that is that we're not watering down the program, that these programs are still putting out highly qualified and trained teachers to do the amazing work that they do, and no one's suggesting otherwise. I don't think anyone in Nova Scotia, right now with our healthcare crisis, no one's suggesting that doctors do less training. Well, it's the same for teachers, right? No, I don't think anyone would suggest that, hey, let's just water down the program so that we can pump out teachers faster, because, again, that goes to the retainment issue. There was a study done at UNB that looked at teachers within their first 5 years of their career, and a third of them are leaving. So you imagine that with any other profession, that a third are just leaving within the first 5 years. So you can pump out all the new teachers that you want. They're not going to stay in the profession. It's not going to help Nova Scotians.
Peter, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll talk again.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. Peter Day, Nova Scotia Teachers Union President. Discover Halifax seeking public input in a significant planning exercise. That when we come back. Ross Jefferson is CEO of Discover Halifax. Ross, welcome to the show.
Todd, it's great to be back with you.
All right, so Discover Halifax hosting 8 regional engagement sessions across HRM in the coming weeks to collect community input and help shape the future of tourism in the municipality. Tell us some more about all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, tourism is a pretty significant contributor. It's no surprise here to our economy in Nova Scotia and in HRM. About $1.3 to $1.5 billion is contributed annually by those that visit just the HRM region. We also know it's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. And, our goal through this exercise is to try to maximize those great things that can happen from the tourism industry, both economic and social, and also minimize the downsides which can occur. And so we're interested in making sure as we take advantage of this as a community that we're not just growing for growth's sake, that our residents and the people that are investing in this industry, that they are also benefiting from this as well. So this particular exercise is a follow-up from the first plan we developed in 2019. And, that plan was a great success. We didn't foresee at that time COVID and the pandemic coming, but it was a fantastic opportunity to have a plan when all of those shovel-ready projects that were needed were brought forward. So we saw, out of the first plan, we saw some pretty significant investments in our community happen. We saw the Peggy's Cove master plan completed, and we opened up George's Island to the public. We launched a new major events office. We invested in some marine infrastructure through HRM. So, and when I say we, it's the entire community, the industry, and all levels of government. So we're excited about this next step and making sure we get public input.
All right. How many ways can you, I guess, reinvent the wheel, I suppose, when it comes to tourism? What novel ideas might there be?
Well, some of them will be just the completion of things that we know were on the first list that didn't completed. We know there are areas that we want to continue to invest in. And I think it's important, every once in a while we've got to go back to our communities. A couple of the things that we really didn't do in the first plan, which we're excited about now. HRM is really, it's not one community, it's a whole bunch of different communities. And what we're doing differently in this plan is that we're actually going to have individual region strategies as well. The Peggy's Cove region is really different than the downtown core. The peninsula here in Halifax is different than Dartmouth, the Eastern Shore, or even out into the Musquodoboit Valley. They're all different regions. So, one plan for all, while there are some synergies, there's also some important differences and some other important opportunities. So this particular time, we're really looking at getting the public's input, getting the input from the industry, and getting the input from those regions so that we can tailor some approaches that make a little bit more sense for those communities too.
Okay, how about American tourism and American tourists? Any concerns at all about what's going on with the United States and ripple effects or people's attitudes towards Americans, I guess? Any issues at all? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, visitation to HRM from the U.S., it's about 6% of our total visitation. It's not nothing. The cruise industry in particular is really dependent upon U.S. visitors coming as well. And while we are expecting that there'll be a potential decline, what we're really expecting to be a big impact is going to be Canadians staying home and traveling more in Canada again. We saw that happen during the pandemic. We know that is happening again right now. And that's a good thing for Canada. That's a good thing for us here in Nova Scotia and in HRM. Between the dollar and the situation that's going on politically, we're expecting to see some benefits from that. And, long term, I guess we'll see where that ends up. But, I think of all the places that'll still be welcoming, I think, I think Maritimes is understanding. And I think, we can't label everyone and with the same brush. I think there's lots of different people with different opinions throughout the world. And so we're going to continue on and build on it.
Yeah, for sure. What about accommodations and the hotel industry and the restaurant industry and I guess all the surrounding supportive industries that go along with it? It's all a huge component to tourism, right?
It is. When you think about the industry, it's probably one of the most complex supply chains that's not managed by anyone. It's not managed by one corporation. It's not managed by one department. From a visitor that decides to book an airplane ticket, to the infrastructure at the airport, to the taxi or limo service or the ride sharing services to get you to your hotel, the restaurants, the experiences. All of those things need to either grow together or support each other. We found a great example in the last few years. We're increasing the number of flights that were coming into to HRM, but visitors were having real difficult time finding cars to rent. So, you've got to go through each bottleneck and go, what's happening right now? Where are the challenges that we have, and where do we go? How do we remove those bottlenecks? But again, it's not just about growth for the sake of growth. We're really interested in making sure that we don't have some of those challenges that other communities do, like over-tourism. I don't think we're there yet, but there are some hot spots that we're watching and we're trying to manage here. So one of our strategies is to try to disperse visitors to other parts of the community that have less visitation and less tourism, so that we can nip any of those challenges in the bud. And that's why I think it's so important for us to hear from the public and those throughout the industry about what they're seeing and what they want to see in their community.
All right. So just where do people get all the information if they want to take part?
Yeah, well, we've got 8 sessions happening over the next 2 weeks. We're inviting industry, and we're inviting anyone in the public that's also interested. If you care about the tourism in your region and in your community, and you want to come see or talk to any of us that are working on this plan with our planners, best thing to do, you can go visit our website to see the information about the plan. You can also see the times and the dates available for those sessions. And our website is discoverhalifaxdmo.com. But if you can't remember that, you can Google tourism planning in Halifax. I'm sure that you'll end up into our site, and you can see the times there.
Okay, Ross, great stuff. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much, and hopefully you have a big success with all of this.
Fantastic. Thanks, Todd, and thanks for your interest.
Okay, take care. Ross Jefferson, CEO to Discover Halifax. Lots to talk about when it comes to reacting to the budget and other things as well with Derek Mombourquette when we come back. All right, joining us is Derek Mombourquette, Liberal interim leader. Derek, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, so the budget and lots of other things to talk about. But first, I want to talk to you about this move with the Auditor General. The government, the bill would allow the Auditor General to be fired without cause, and very concerning. Also, beyond that, the timeline as to when reports would be issued, a 2-week minimum timeline for the auditor to submit a report to the government before releasing it to the public. In addition, the bill would give the government the power to withhold the reports for reasons of what they call public interest, public safety, or legal privilege. What was your response to this?
Yeah, it makes no sense to me. We have a great respect for the Auditor General's office and the work that she does and her team does. I've had the opportunity to sit on both sides of the floor in government and in opposition, and I really just don't understand the rationale of having the ability to fire her without cause. It's as she said in her interviews, and she said this morning, she asked the government to rescind the bill. The independence of that is key. That office does so many reports that are important for transparency for any government. So for them to put this bill forward, not only to be able to fire her without cause, but also really shield any reports that come forward, is really, we're in a sad state of affairs if that's starting to happen here in the province.
Yeah, and you have to wonder if there must be a motivation to want to go out of their way to create this to create this legislation. And it makes you wonder, obviously, that they'll see a need to use it at some point.
Well, we've seen it really in the last number of weeks. We saw the time cut down for opposition members to speak at committee. We saw yesterday that, public accounts, which is really the committee where the Auditor General comes forward and provides various reports on their work. They don't want to meet now during the legislature because ultimately they don't want to be answering questions in the legislature on those reports of public accounts as meetings. So you wouldn't put it in place, in my opinion, if you didn't want to use it. So as I said, it's really, I don't understand why they're doing it. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, again, there's only one reason why they want to do it, and that's to erode transparency and accountability. There's no other reason for it. There's no other reason I can assume.
Yeah, well, so they operated in one. In the last term, they operated with the independents in place, without these bills in place, and now they have a supermajority where now they're going to try to exercise that power to do whatever they want. And in this case, with this bill, now that they have they very easily can go into the legislature if they don't like the work that the Auditor General is doing and fire her.
Wow.
Yeah, it's I've never seen anything like it in my political career. That's for sure.
Indeed. All right, let's talk about the budget itself. $17.6 billion budget with a deficit spending of nearly $700 million for the fiscal year, $200 million reserve fund in case it needs to be used if in response to tariffs from the United States, if in fact it looks like that's going to happen. What are your thoughts, I guess? Anything standing out that you like from this budget?
Well, they're making certain investments, as they say, in healthcare, and they did leave a contingency for tariffs, which is something that we all want to play our part in to help support the province. But it's the overall size of the deficit is really what's concerning to me. You're in that $700 million range now, where you have an economy that very well, indicators are is that it could slow in the coming months and years. You could see a change in federal transfers. The Auditor General talked about how the province is relying on really one of every $3 is coming from the federal government for transfers. So if you see any shift in those equations, it's going to leave the province in a tough spot because when you're running a deficit that high, knowing that all of your projections into the future that we're seeing, where the economy may slow, this adds to the debt. You're seeing the debt go north of $20 billion in their projections. It could be tough on the books to provide services and supports in the future.
All right, what about tax cuts? I mean, everybody likes a tax cut. There's a 1% cut to the HST down to 14%. Tolls off the bridges in Halifax. Good thing on tax cuts?
Well, it was something that we campaigned on too as well when it came to tax cuts. So, you know what I mean? We know that the cost of living is tough for people. That's something that we hear loud and clear in our office and our local offices as MLAs. So, there's things that we propose that similarly they're trying to implement in their budget. When it comes to the bridge tolls, that's something I never supported. I don't see the rationale around removing those tolls. Now the government's going to have to, find the money to really help pay for some of those infrastructure upgrades that we know are coming. So tax cuts, support, anything that we can do to support our families. Of course, it's something I hear every day on the bridge tolls. I don't support the idea of removing them.
Okay, personal exemption for personal income tax as well. This is something. What are your thoughts on and business as well? Tax cuts for businesses. Did you support those?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's stuff we campaigned on too as well. So we campaigned on the exemption. We campaigned on lowering business taxes. So again, we're in a situation where with the threat of tariffs, you want to do whatever you can to support our small businesses, whether small or large, and that's in that matter. We have some large exporters in our province too as well. So anything we can do to help support business at this point, I would support. It's stuff. These are things that we campaigned on as a party, and we would support.
All right. What about the about face when it comes to fracking and uranium exploration? Tim Houston quite bold in his comments about this, saying that for far too long we've got it wrong here, and it says that this type of development has been done safely in other jurisdictions within Canada. They says it could be done safely here as well. It's time for us to be adults about that. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I had the privilege of being the Minister of Energy and Mines for the province for 3 years during our time in government. So I've had a lot of exposure when it comes to the mineral resource development. We've seen some successful projects across the province, working closely with companies, but also working with communities and having the conversations around mineral extraction, what that looks like, making sure that companies pay up front to reclaim land. So it's been something that I've been heavily involved in. I don't understand the narrative around the special interest groups, because they're trying to build this communications around these special interest groups that have been in the province blocking these projects. The industry would tell you a lot of times it's really based on the price of the commodity. So you see oil and gas, that fluctuates. You see critical minerals fluctuate. So companies are going to make the decision to mine based on market conditions too as well. We just need to make sure as a province that we're doing it in a way that we're engaging with important stakeholders in the community, whether it's the community themselves, whether it's the big mine and other people who are stewards of the land. So we support resource development, but just the narrative right now about the special interest groups is frustrating.
So why did the Liberal government not move forward with this and the ban on fracking and uranium exploration? Why no movement when the Liberals had the opportunity to do so? And as you mentioned when you were the minister.
Yeah, so essentially at the time there was a lot of conversations in communities around fracking and there's the different types of fracking. So we made the decision at the time, which all parties supported, including the current premier when he was in opposition, that we would put a moratorium in place and we would take more time to research and engage in communities. So uranium has been a ban that's been in place for a number of years that the government's also looking to remove. And we look forward to engaging in those conversations with communities, but the whole idea around the fracking at the time was that it was all supported by all parties, was that we needed more time to do research and talk to communities. Okay, so fundamentally, you're comfortable with this movement then? Well, I think we need to engage more on the fracking file with communities. I still think that as a caucus, we want to engage more before we would go down the road to completely remove a ban on fracking. That's something that is done in other jurisdictions. We're trying to do our part now to see what other communities are doing and engaging in communities to see how they feel. We believe in the mineral resource extraction side of it. I've been involved with a lot of it, whether it was gold or, lime or any of the other mining operations in the province. But fracking for us right now, we're not there yet. We need to have some more engagement with communities.
Okay, Derek, appreciate your time. Thanks so much. We'll talk again.
Okay, I always appreciate it.
All right, take care. Derek Mombourquette, Liberal interim leader. Speaking of these changes, the Ecology Action Centre criticized the Nova Scotia's bill to lift bans on fracking and uranium exploration. We'll talk with Ray Plourde when we come back.
Thanks.
Raymond Plourde is the wilderness coordinator with the Ecology Action Centre and joins us for a chat. Ray Plourde, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time, of course.
My pleasure, Todd.
All right, so an about face to say the very least when it comes to extraction. The province has moved to lift the ban on fracking and uranium exploration, being criticized by your organization. What are the concerns?
Well, first of all, the Premier has said in a whole bunch of letters and pronouncements and front page ads in the Chronicle Herald just in recent weeks and so on, that he wants to have a conversation with Nova Scotians about these things, that's the goal. But I believe it was yesterday or the day before, they introduced legislation to remove the bans on uranium mining and on fracking, exploration and development. These are old wounds here in Nova Scotia, and he just ripped the bandage right off and then said, but I want to have a conversation. So this isn't a conversation when you have the head of the family, so to speak, decide what the outcome is and then says, but let's have a conversation about it. He's already gone to the end point and said what's going to happen. So, having a conversation is different than having something shoved down your throat. There's a big difference. And, the Premier keeps saying that he listens to Nova Scotia and he's always going to listen to Nova Scotians, but he's not listening, he's telling. And we would be fine to have a mature conversation, but a mature conversation is an open-ended discussion with many possible outcomes. That's not what the Premier's doing. The Premier prefers imperial pronouncements over public consultations. I don't know if anyone remembers, a consultation on, big issues like taking over Halifax Housing and Planning Authority in their first term, or declaring that we're all in on green hydrogen. There were no public consultations for that, and there were no public consultations over removing these long-held bans, which, as I say, are kind of like ripping the bandage off of a wound here in Nova Scotia.
Well, could the argument be made that the consultation is inevitably, where it's going to end up anyway? That what is there to consult when groups like the Ecology Action Centre are pretty adamant that they're never going to support this type of thing? So might the Premier say, look, we could have for optics or for show a type of a consultation tour, but in the end, what's the point of wasting everybody's time?
Right, so he could put on a show of some kind of public consultation, but he's already indicated very strongly, both in words and now in legislation before the House, that that's the end point. So conversation would only be for show after the fact.
No, but I get it. But you're saying that you would have liked to have had more consultation. Well, how much more is there to say, I guess, over all of this?
Well, I think there's actually a lot to say about this. If the government wants to have mature conversations with the public, which is what they've been saying, even though they're kind of going to the end point and installing it, saying there's a lot to discuss. For example, our organization has recommended to this government and to the previous McNeil government that there's a lot of competing land uses. We're noticing, with green hydrogen projects and possible other big industrial projects coming on board here in the province, and with the commitment for 20% protection by 2030, which is a global treaty that Canada has signed with all the other nations of the world, and Nova Scotia is doing its part to reach 20%. The national target is 30, but 20% for Nova Scotia is a reasonable target. We're at somewhere under 14% now. It's ambitious but doable, and these are competing land use. So we have said to at least the last two governments that what is needed is comprehensive, holistic Crown land use planning process. And in his very long 6-page letter to his caucus that kind of kicked off this sudden change that was never mentioned in the election, the notion of putting forward, or clearing the decks for uranium mining and fracking and so on, things that Nova Scotians have said they're not comfortable with over the years, and have, consulted with their governments and so on, and it's been duly arrived at, that, they're a comprehensive land use planning that looks at all of these things in a spatial area, given that we only have 30% Crown land, 70% is privately owned. So figuring out where, and in his letter to his caucus, he had said, mines and other things like that, heavy industrial projects, there are places where they could go and places where they should never go. So we agree with that, and that needs to be sorted out. But both the McNeil government and the Houston government have steadfastly refused to do that, probably because it's complicated and it would require decisions. Where do things go? Where do they not go? Where shouldn't they go? And so, if they want to have a mature conversation where it is open-ended in terms of where the final result will land, that's fine. And comprehensive land use planning would be one of the things we have recommended and would recommend again, because that is necessary, but nobody's doing it.
All right, the size of our province is geographically is quite small. We're a peninsula, practically an island. This adds to this, I'm sure, the concern here, and the proximity of people living to woods and all of this stuff. This adds to this, does it?
Well, absolutely. In fact, that's the kind of thing that it seems the Premier and his government just won't acknowledge. They keep citing much larger provinces to the west that are doing, heavy resource extraction, in particular Alberta. Alberta is always the example. Mm-hmm. Well, Nova Scotia is like only 53,337 kilometers square. Alberta is 12 times that size. And Quebec, as another example, is 25 times the size of Nova Scotia. Their populations are largely in the south, and they have very vast territories where there are very few people. So doing like the tar sands in Alberta or uranium mining, for example, or something else in Quebec or Ontario is much different than here in Nova Scotia. We are the second smallest province in the country, like I said, 1/25th the size of Quebec, mm-hmm. and our population is spread out throughout. 70% of the land is private, and we have the most densely populated rural areas. So the notion that EAC has stopped anything along these lines is ludicrous. It is the public that has spoken to their duly elected governments over these issues over the years and decades, and they reflect the reality of the size of our province, the density of rural population, and the fact that you cannot do a big, heavy industrial project like a uranium mine anywhere in this province where you're not going to be close to somebody's community. And that is difficult to deal with, but it is our reality. And that's something that the Premier has not acknowledged.
All right, terms like special interest groups or whatever the exact term is, the kind of that pejorative terminology, that doesn't help the conversation as far as I'm concerned. What are your thoughts on that?
No, it certainly doesn't. Vilifying segments of society which represent, segments of the population is just cheap politics. And it's a deliberately cooked up narrative that I think distracts people from maybe seeing other things that the government isn't so keen on the public focusing in on. So this is kind of like a straw man or a punching bag saying, here, they're the problem, go get them. It's a cheap political tactic. It's a false political narrative. It reduces complex issues into cartoon slogans. You know, take the no out of Nova Scotia. I mean, that'll look great on a T-shirt. Where have we seen that before? Yeah. And the Premier really is confusing his electoral success in the last election with some kind of feeling of omnipotence, as if he can walk on water and nothing he can do or say could be possibly wrong. A carte blanche to do anything he wants. And that's not what Nova Scotians voted for in the last election. I mean, Todd, I'm looking at the Premier and PC party platform, and it says lower taxes, more doctors, higher wages. It never mentions anything about lifting long-held bans on dangerous substances like uranium or fracking, which threaten well waters and surface water and land and so on and so forth. That was held back by the government. They knew they were going to do that. And, as far as confusing, his electoral success with omnipotence, it's instructive to remember that in the last Nova Scotia election held just a couple months ago, only 45% of the population bothered to vote. So this PC supermajority was achieved with about just a little bit less than 24% of the population's support. And yet they're acting as if 100% of the population voted in this supermajority. And they're also confusing their election platform, which is what people voted on and for, with we're omnipotent, we're going to do whatever we want, and anything we say goes. And that is, unfortunately, following what we're seeing in a lot of Western democracies, a trend toward autocracy and, the boss calling all the shots, just pointing to, as they have been doing repeatedly in the legislature, to their electoral success, as if that is a mandate from 100% of the population to do whatever the hell they want. And that's not true.
Okay, Ray, appreciate your time. Thank you.
You bet, Todd.
All right, take care. Raymond Plourde, Wilderness Coordinator with the Ecology Action Centre. Your calls when we come back.
Facts.
All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. What would you like to get into today? Of course, the Four Nations Cup final goes tonight, Canada versus the U.S. in Boston. Will you watch the game, and how much do you care? Maybe some of you out there don't care. I'm sure some of you don't. I know that many of you do. With tensions between the two countries extremely high right now, what are your predictions for an outcome of this game? And again, will you pay attention to it? I guess Donald Trump is talking. He was invited to the game by members of the United States management, I guess we could call it. I think the general manager of the team, whoever put the team together. And Trump declined, but did not miss the opportunity to take a shot at Canada again, referring again to the 51st state routine, the same old thing. So anyway, tensions are high right now between the two countries, and we know that the first game was a spirited event with 3 fights within the first 10 seconds, including before the puck was even dropped. So will you watch tonight? What are your thoughts on the Four Nations final tonight? Also, of course, lots to get to. The move by the government to allow the Auditor General to be fired without cause is unbelievable, in my opinion. I think this is absolutely outrageous, to use Rick's term. A bill tabled would allow for the dismissal of the auditor as long as 2/3 of the ledge agreed, of course, which is they have 2/3. So for all intents and purposes, that's a done deal. The Premier also moved to amend the Auditor General's Act to establish a 2-week minimum timeline for the auditor to submit a report to the government before releasing it to the public. In addition, the bill would give the government the power to withhold Auditor General reports for reasons of public interest, public safety, or legal privilege. Can you believe this? So, A, he could fire her for no just cause, just simply dismiss her, or any Auditor General. That's the first thing. Secondly, the reports have to be handed over to the government 2 weeks before being released, and then they can be redacted or not released at all based on the government's decision. I mean, is this democracy, folks? This is an affront to democracy, in my opinion. This should get people outraged. If this does not upset you, then you do not clearly care about what's going on in your democracy. I think this is one of the boldest, largest affronts to democracy I've seen in a very, very long time, and shame on the Houston government for this legislation. And you have to ask yourself the question, where did this come from? Why? Why would this be necessary? And I can only come to the conclusion that they intend to use it at some point. So you can get into that. A new poll suggests that more than a quarter of Canadians, 27% now see the United States as an enemy country, while another 30% say they can still consider the U.S. an ally. What are your thoughts on that, folks? Strange times we're living in. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Let's start off with Tony. Hello, Tony.
Good morning, Todd. Todd, I want to talk about democracy. Let's talk about south of the border first.
Sure.
On the 20th of January, I called you and I said, Todd, democracy has died today. And later on in the show, your last caller gave me a tutorial in democracy and said I should have more faith, that I should understand, that I should do this and do that. Well, I invite him to call me and tell me how he likes the first 30 days of democracy in the U.S. That's the end of that story, amen.
Yeah.
In Canada, I'm going to ask you a question. It's rhetorical. You can answer it if you want. Was the current government in the province duly elected?
Duly elected? How do you, if you define
was
duly.
Was it a democratic election? Let's put it that way. Was it done democratically? And were all the people who could vote given the opportunity to vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
I would say yes. I would have to defer to yes. I'm sure that nothing's perfect, but I would say yes. Okay,
I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But the issue that you're talking about with the what is it? The Attorney General? What is she?
The Auditor General, Kim Adair, Auditor General.
Auditor General.
Yeah.
They have the power to do what they want. They were awarded the power in a fair and legal election. Is it right? I don't want to discuss whether it's right or wrong. Were they given that power by those people in the population that voted? That's the question. And now, what are those people that didn't? Why are those people that didn't vote or voted for the other side looking at it and going, whoa, this is not right. It's not right. By the way, I don't agree with what they're doing, but that's off the record. I'm not getting involved in a local election. But that's an issue of democracy in my mind. Yesterday, a lamed-up prime minister got up in front of the people and gave us a pleasant gift as he goes out the door, a $4 billion high-speed railroad between what? Toronto and Quebec City. Who's going to pay for this?
Yeah.
Are all 10 provinces and 3 territories going to pay for it? Of course that they are. But $4 billion and this guy has no power. Who approved that? Did it go to the Parliament for approval? Even though he may be a lamed-up prime minister, he didn't go to Parliament to get approval on this. He did it on his own. Is that democracy?
Well, it may never come to pass, but Tony, it likely will never come to pass. I mean, this is not the first time.
We can say that about a lot of things. We said a lot of things about south of the border, and we said a lot of things about north of the border. That will never happen. We will never see that happen. Well, as you well know, and I mean, we can pick them out, and you don't have a lot of time, and I appreciate the time you give me, so I'm not going to try and defend that with each circumstance that has taken place. There will be cost overruns. We know that happens. There will be delays, and it only serves 1/4, 18 million of the people, maybe 18 million of the people in Canada.
Yeah.
So that's less than half the people are paying for. Are being serviced by what 100% of the people are paying for. And then we got one other issue. The guy that is being touted as the second coming is, if he, explain this to me, Todd, and I mean this legitimately, if he is in fact anointed, you know who I'm talking about, Carney, if he is in fact anointed and becomes the interim prime minister, he doesn't have a seat in Parliament. If my understanding is correct, and I'm not a legal scholar for Nova Scotia or Canada, he can't sit in that he cannot sit on the floor of the Parliament. So where is he going to sit? Up in the balcony and shout instructions or send semaphore? What the hell is he going to do?
Well, I mean, he's going to call an election almost immediately. He would only be the prime minister without. You're absolutely right. He can't sit. He can't sit because he doesn't have a seat. But
I don't know that. See, I'm asking. I've heard that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. He can't sit. But that he said that he would call an election pretty much immediately after winning the leadership. So that's neutered,
right,
really.
Let's take for granted. Let's say he wins it. What happens then? He still doesn't have a seat. Is he running for a seat at the same time that he's going?
No, absolutely not. But he will run for a seat in the election. So let's say that Carney wins, and then 2 weeks later he calls a federal election, which he can do. And then he would run. He would pick he could be Halifax because we have a vacancy here. I'm not saying it would be likely, wouldn't be, but it could be. But he could parachute into any riding that he sees fit, a safe place where he thinks he'll win, and that would be his riding of choice.
You know, Todd, I don't mean to be a SOB, but I love that word that you used. He can parachute in. He can parachute himself into a major liberal riding that has a seat available. And is that really democracy?
Well, no.
I don't know.
Well, but that is. I agree with you, but that's nothing. That to me is nothing new. The parachuting candidates in that's so common, Tony.
It's business as usual here in Canada. I know that, Todd. I know it. But is it democratic? That's all I want to know. We talk about democracy. You and I both talk about democracy. Sometimes I use it out of context. You use it out of context. A lot of people use it out of context. Yeah. But you know, if you're going to talk about democracy, let's say we have a modified democracy, even in the U.S., no doubt. I'm Todd. If the Supreme Court rolls over and Trump truly has the justice leg of the triumvirate that runs the United States, it's all over. Yeah. You know that, right? It's done. Yeah. It is done. We are, and I'm telling you something that I generally don't share with people. I'm flying a black flag with 50 stars on it. Mm. I took the American flag down. I don't wear American paraphernalia anymore. Am I ashamed? I'm embarrassed. I'm not ashamed. You know, I did 30 years in the military. I'm not ashamed of what I did, but I am embarrassed by what's taking place after the 49th parallel.
Okay, Tony, I got a boogie. Thanks, pal.
Okay, thanks, all right. Thank you for the time, pal.
Okay,
you have a great day.
Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Hello, Tim.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Very good. Yes, I'll be watching the game. Yes, I anticipate Canada win, and I'll be happy to see how it all unfolds. As it relates to the Attorney General, what the Conservatives doing, I think we should all be outraged. I think, although he may be able to do it, being the Conservatives, it's certainly the perception is it's an abuse of power. She's either doing her job too well, and that raises issues and concerns with him directly. If she's doing her job well, that's what she should be doing. And, this idea that the Attorney General gives the report 2 weeks in advance, you only do that for one reason, that's to hide any information from the general public.
Yep.
And when you're hiding it, that's extremely unfortunate, and perception becomes reality. Where this came from is beyond me, but there's obviously issues or concerns, as I said, that we should be all concerned about, and we should hold Mr. Houston and the Conservatives accountable.
Yeah, but that's the issue, though. How do you hold somebody accountable when they've got 4 long years with the 2/3? I mean, that's the problem. Is that where is the accountability? And to me, if you have a 2/3 majority, that's an even more critical time to have an auditor general, with full authority, right?
Well, he either tells you the direction that the Conservatives are going, and he doesn't want somebody like the current Attorney General or somebody else to do their job well, because then he's able to bury things and hide things.
Yeah, clearly. Why else would you do it? There's no other reason why you would do it, is there, Tim?
That's the only reason why you do it, because if you're doing things the way you should be doing, and that is, responsible, and you're accountable to the taxpayers, then why are you so concerned?
Yep. I can't disagree with that. Really, if somebody's got a better argument, then I don't know why else you would go out of your way with all of the things that you could be doing with this supermajority right now to benefit Nova Scotians' lives. Stripping powers from the Auditor General, to me, is and being able to fire her without cause is just unbelievable.
Well, in my opinion, that just tells you the direction that the Conservatives are going over the next 4 years. And collectively, from one end of this province to the other, we should be extremely concerned both about Mr. Houston and his actions and the Conservatives, because I think, as I said, it's certainly not promising why they're putting her in that position, because basically what they're doing is tying her hands.
Yep. Can't disagree. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.
Take care. 902-405-6000. Vic, hello. Hi, Vic.
Hello.
Hi there. Go ahead.
How you? No, good. Thank you.
Great.
Just wanted to mention a couple of things that you had brought up.
Sure.
As far as Mr. Trump goes, I think America is just as every bit important to us as it ever was, but I've nothing good to say about Trump. As far as the hockey game goes, anticipating a win by Canada, 3-2. Mr. Houston, power corrupts. I believe he ran on transparency, was one of the things he ran on when he was Steve McNeil, I believe. I think I had got that right.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks terrible. And as your previous caller said, I think we're going to expect more of that over the next few years. That's just my opinion on things. So,
okay. Great. Thanks for the call, pal. Appreciate it. Take care. 902-405-6000. Larry, hello.
How you doing?
Doing well.
Well, I've been listening to your show, and it just gets my hackles up, listening to this stuff. But there's so much truth that some of your customers have been saying there. Like, this is such a two-faced, backstabbing government that just pulled this off, and they pulled it off with a major majority. And the other thing is, people got to remember that this happened before here, many years ago. Do you remember a person by the name of John Savage?
Yes. I mean, it predates me, but I do know who John Savage is.
Yeah, that's Mike Savage.
Or was, yep.
Yeah, it was. But anyhow, when he was pushing that amalgamation thing, you remember that?
Well, again, it predates me, but I know the storyline for sure.
Okay. Well, I'll just give you a little bit of history, because there's probably a lot of people still remember that, and still bugs them as well.
Yeah.
Is the same thing's happening now, is that when amalgamation was going on, there was a quorum for the general public to come in, plead their case, plead their story, plead their rhyme and reason. And Mr. Savage on the news was there sleeping the whole time, pretty much, sawing logs while these people were out there bleeding their bloody hearts out. And then when he woke up, he says, come on, get on with it, basically, because it's passed anyhow. And these people went in there doing that. And this is what this government just did again. And then the other thing about this here big pay raise they gave themselves, boy, that sure wasn't on their agenda, was it? And there's a lot of people that don't even see close to that much of them money in their accounts at all. Even look at the people living on the streets and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Another two-faced thing. And Mr. Houston, this fracking thing, there's this thing out here, all this construction going on, Mount Uniacke way, friggin' they're doing some dynamite and all that stuff, and it was brought to their attention by some of the locals around there that they could feel their houses shake and all that, and nobody's gone over there to actually be there when the blasts are going on, and you can feel the rock formation, all these glacial rock formations shaking and going right through it. Like, I'm talking 3 kilometers. You be in your yard or you be in your house, you can hear it rumble and you can feel it shake. And you tell me there's nobody there monitoring that stuff because nobody's back in the middle of the woods checking it out. So that's been brought to their attention. But yeah, Mr. Houston doing this thing about the Auditor General as well. She's the only watchdog that we have to protect our butts, as taxpayers. And he wants to take that away. So obviously he does have a secret agenda, figuring basically I can do what the hell I want now. No, you can't. Buddy, when you get back from the States, you got to be able to walk the streets. Everybody knows what the hell you look like. Same with some of his counselors and that. You people got to realize you work for us. We're the general public. We're the taxpayers. You work for us. We are your employers. You don't go two-facing on us because guess what? Your ass is going to be grass.
Okay, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Again, 902-405-6000. Again, in all the years that I've been talking about politics and all the issues over the years, this is one of the most egregious affronts to the democratic process that I can recall. For no reason other than to put a problem aside, the ability to enact legislation where you can dismiss the Auditor General without cause, and to require a report to be delivered to you, who the reports are about 2 weeks before they're released, and then they can be withheld. Does that resemble anything like a democracy? 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when you come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. Getting lots of emails on this Auditor General story, and all of them are pretty much the same. I'll read this one, and it pretty much encapsulates what everybody's saying. Shameful and sneaky. I encourage everyone to go to the Premier's Facebook page and comment. We put Tim Houston there, and this is not accountability, so if he thinks that it's life and firing happens in jobs, then guess what? I'm firing you right now. You're fired, Tim. Hypocrite Houston from Lisa. Anyway, look, again, I've not received one email from anybody or comment as of yet defending this. I don't know how you could. But the sad reality of it is probably this, is that by the time an election comes around here in Nova Scotia, this will be ancient history. It'll probably be ancient history in 3 days. That's just the sad commentary on the election cycle. But I don't know. If I have anything to do with it, folks, if I have any say, I'll be bringing it up. If I'm around in 4 years, and these look, and again, it's not a reflection on the government in general, and perhaps they'll do good things. But this move to write into legislation the ability to dismiss the Auditor General without cause and to basically limit reports and to be able to have them submitted 2 weeks before they go to the public and then to be redacted, if not fully, completely removed, is an affront to democracy and egregious, and it's absolutely disgusting, in my opinion. Again, to use Rick's term, it's an outrage. 902-405-6000, that's the way to reach us. Brendan's a first-time caller. Hello, Brendan.
Hi, how are you?
Well, you?
Well, a little outraged, as I think everyone else is. I think it's pretty crazy with the Auditor General reports, from just everything we're seeing from this government. It's very reminiscent of Trump, I think, the way Tim Houston's currently acting with his supermajority. I also wanted to say, all the premiers were in Washington the other week. I didn't see any pictures of Tim Houston with the premiers, and now apparently he's back in there lobbying again. Who exactly is he meeting with?
That's a good question.
I think it's just crazy. A couple of, last week it was the provinces allowing access to mining companies onto private people's lands without their permission. This week it's the Auditor General's fired. I mean, I think our democracy is as much in threat as the Americans is right now, with the way Tim's acting.
Well, there's perhaps, like you said. I mean, this move when it comes to it's unbelievable. I'm at a loss for words, to be honest with you. I don't know how else.
Really.
I don't know how else I can describe how I feel about this, other than I'm outraged. To me, that is the Auditor General. The Auditor General has always been an office of high integrity, regardless of jurisdiction that I've worked in or reported on. And it's pretty evident why we need an Auditor General, an independent body for somebody to go in and have access to the government books and to be able to report to the public things that the government will not let you see otherwise. To me, that is a hallmark of democracy. And to erode those powers, there's no other reason other than because they're a pain in your backside if you're the government, and you want to be able to muzzle them. I see no other reason why.
I think we're being fleeced.
Yeah.
I think we're being fleeced. It's even in that news report there at the bottom of the hour, they announced they just sold that building that they unsolicitedly bought a couple of years ago in Bedford.
Yeah.
Love to see the details of
exactly. Brendan, that's a great that's a great point. That's exactly why the Auditor General is for, to look into stuff like that. So let's say the Auditor General digs into it. Spends all types of resources, taxpayer resources, which I'm fine paying, and delivers a report to the government 2 weeks before it's going to be released, and they go, you know what, we don't think it's in the public interest for the public to see this, so we're not going to allow it. That, to me, is an affront to democracy.
It's a sham. And on the resource development, I'd say, I think we do need some resource development in the province, but it wasn't Tim Houston's mandate. He didn't run the election on it. And to go full steam into it while also cutting the legs off of the only independent body to oversee the government, especially with a supermajority.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's playing with Trump's playbook, I think.
Okay, thanks for the call. And on the resource extraction, whether you agree with it or not, and I think that I don't disagree with that we should be more aggressively pursuing some of these things. But to the caller's point, where was that narrative during the campaign? Not a peep, not a word. 902-405-6000. Hello, Bill.
How you doing, Todd?
I'm well. You?
Well, it could be better. I guess I got a broken shoulder there. It's kind of kept me under the weather.
Really?
Yeah. I fell down on the icy road there.
When?
Anyway.
When did that happen, Bill?
About a month ago. I just come from the doctor a couple of days ago.
Wow.
So I'm laying low. Anyway, I thought I'd get on today because there's so many little things there that I'd like to let go. First of all, I'm hoping Santorini, my favorite destination, tourist-wise, survives, because all these volcanoes all over the world right now are erupting up there. But that's the best little location for tourists ever. Anyway, I guess it's all the government here right now. First of all, I think that's a shame about the Auditor General. No question about that. That should be pretty well clear and not being tampered with. So I don't know what you can do about that. But there's other things there. You pick up the paper in the morning, you read it. Now, today I'm looking at the one there. They're going to do something with this QE2 over a period of 6 or 7 years. And we're talking $6 or $7 billion dollars, when they can't even, right now they can't even man with the doctors and so on as it is. I mean, that's ridiculous. Your listeners should check out to see how much publicity or whatever see when they wanted to get the contract. Who is these people who's got the contract, and what kind of competition?
Well, I'm going off memory, but I think it was. I think there was only one bid. I don't even think there was more.
That's what I'm driving at.
Yeah,
in the paper, the name's in the paper, but I'm saying it should have been that kind of money. That's maybe the biggest contract ever.
Yeah, but Bill, the challenge is that there are very few companies that have the ability to do that type of work. And to have the deep pockets in order to do it. So this is the challenge with this type of work, is that there's not a lot of companies that can do that.
I don't even see them doing it, Todd. We can't even man what we got right now. You just go up there I've been up there a couple of times trying to get down there to go in the long pedways and everything else. They don't have the personnel, doctors and nurses, maybe nurses, but certainly don't have the doctors to man what we got now, right now. At least it should have been some ads in the paper seeking other bidders where I don't know how, I never seen nothing where they were looking for people. But I'll tell you, Todd, we are in an awful mess. There's only one thing that you can do. It could perhaps bring a little bit of a halt or control over any government that's in place. The taxpayers who pay the bills, if they were somehow, a force to be reckoned with where there was enough of them, okay? The other one thing left is the bridge tolls. I can't believe the ones that are using the bridge, they're the ones that are paying for it now, and it's working out okay. Why do we suddenly got to open it up and say, well, old Mr. Jones and Jack Sherry or whoever back up there in Berwick, you never used the bridge, but it doesn't matter. You're going to have to pay. I think we're in a terrible mess, Todd. Terrible. But anyway, that's my little thing. What do you think?
Well, I think he makes a good point. See, it's always, Bill. Hopefully heal up soon, pal. Let's talk soon.
Okay.
Thanks, buddy.
Man.
Okay, 902-405-6000. Chris, hello.
Good morning, Todd. I don't know where to start.
Yeah.
Outrageous is not nearly a strong enough term. I can't think of a term strong enough to condemn what Houston is proposing to do with the Auditor General.
Yeah.
That is unfreaking believable. And not only that, as you're probably aware, with all the things you went through with it, they also plan to get rid of Communications Nova Scotia, which, in case people don't understand what it is a government agency that was set up through legislation. And they were tasked with producing nonpartisan material for the public so we could read and learn what's going on. Also, your Freedom of Information Act. That's going to be curtailed to the point that whoever's the head of the public entity that you want the information from has the right and the ability to refuse your application if they deem it to be frivolous, vexatious, or not specific enough. I mean, this is a pretty autocratic move or a king-like move, and I'm not really surprised in a way because lately it seems a lot of the elected leaders are behaving like kings or autocrats or dictators or what have you. We've got Trump, obviously. That's one of my least favorite words in my life right now is Trump. And I've said it twice. Trudeau's been behaving like that literally the entire time he's been in. And to Tony's point about the $4 billion on the high-speed rail, I'm in agreement with you. It'll never see the light of day. But the $4 billion, that's only a deposit for planning and design and so on. They have no idea what the friggin' thing would cost. They said that. They have no idea what the total cost would be. Mm-hmm. But getting back to Houston for a second, it lets me know, it underscores completely, in my opinion, that Houston plans to do things that he knows the public will not like or agree with, and he's got to keep us from being able to know anything about it. And as far as transparency, he ran on transparency, I thought. This is an affront to transparency. But to Houston, I think transparency means, well, we'll tell you what we think you need to know, and we'll tell it to you in a way that we think best explains how good it is for you. Mm-hmm. Bullshit. I'm not allowed, I guess, to say that word anymore.
Good catch, anyway, good catch.
Bullshit. It's just complete. Can I make one comment about this 29% raise? The 29% in itself is a catch-up type of thing, and it always looks really bad. Brings them up to about $115,000 a year, which I don't disagree that they should earn. They should actually, if they did their job properly, they probably would deserve more than that. But the thing that upsets me about our representation in general is it was brought to my attention, not that I didn't know it before, but it was brought to my attention in a news article I was listening to from the States, where a representative in Congress was mentioning his 800,000 constituents. I got thinking, 800,000, that's like almost one representative for all of Nova Scotia, for God's sake. We got 55 MLAs. That averages out to about 20,000 constituents per. We've got 338 MPs in Canada, and that's like about 120,000 constituents per MP. But yet, this congressman, and most of them in the States, have 800,000 odd constituents. That's our problem. We don't need 55 MLAs. We don't need 16 councillors in HRM either. I think this number should be at least cut it in half. That would save money, definitely. There's no question about that. Save money on salaries, wages, benefits, the whole deal. But don't you agree with me, Todd?
Yeah, we're way overgoverned. It's ridiculous. And then you get the Senate that's represented, MPs. We are way overrepresented, and the cost of return on investment is
nil.
Yeah, it's not even there. It's not even measurable at this point.
It's actually, Todd, I think that in Canada, in Nova Scotia certainly, if not all of Canada as well, our over-representation is actually making us, in my opinion, underrepresented, because every time you turn around, and we hear it when the councillors on the hot seat are all the time, that, well, that's not our jurisdiction, that's provincial. Well, that's not this, that's not that. So we're getting no bang for our buck, no benefit from it, in my opinion, whatsoever, except we're padding a lot of people's pensions and bank accounts and so on unnecessarily.
Okay, Chris, got a boogie. Thanks for the call.
Thank you, Todd.
Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, 902-405-6000. Hello, Len. Hi, Len. Len, are you there? Okay, I'll put you on hold. 902-405-6000. Jim, hello.
How you doing, Todd?
Well, you?
Good, thanks. Just some quick comments. On the Premier's statement there, our best friends in the House now, believe it or not, are the opposition parties. Hopefully that they'll continue the outrage in regards to this. But Tim's been on your show a couple times now, and he seems to have no problem coming on your show. So I'm looking forward to challenging him to get on your phone or on your show and explain himself. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because I do respect him, and I would like to see him get on your radio show and explain to all of us as to why he's doing this. Now, I was a former auditor with the police department, and it's not unusual for the auditors to feel that the recommendations go in one ear and out the other. And if you recall, Mayor Savage's council made an apology to their auditor general not too long ago for not basically paying attention to the recommendations. So it's not unusual. But it's something where I think I'll give the Premier the benefit of the doubt now, unless he doesn't feel that he should get on your radio show and explain to us all what's going on. The second part of it is the hockey game tonight. My take on it is I'm hoping Canada's going to win, of course, but I hope, Todd, they win in overtime.
Why?
Because that really hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, I played a lot of athletics in my day, and when you lose in overtime, boy, it just eats you up. So I hope they win. I hope they win in overtime. I did watch the 72 Russia Series games, and it's kind of funny that during that series, Canadians booed the Canadian team one time there, and I think it was Frank Mahovlich or Peter. One of them got all worked up and said, "Let's go home. Canadians, we got to get our act together and play." So the Canadians, ironically, booed the Canadian team playing the Russians. So if Trump's molten off about, I think he made a statement, didn't he, about this hockey game?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
Yeah, he's going on again about, he's warming up to Putin so much. But in regards to that, I think I heard Tony on the air there just a little while ago. And in fairness to Tony, I got to say to Tony, if he's listening, you're an American and you're a Canadian citizenship, and rightly so. Good luck to you. But you're going to have to put up with some pushback from Canadians on this American thing until it settles down. Hopefully there'll be nothing physically done or anything like that or threats toward, people like Tony. But they're going to have to put with the pushback because it's heating up. It's getting worse. So tonight's game, hopefully, will be overtime. Canadians win.
Okay, Jim, thanks for the call, pal. Take care.
Take care.
All right, 902-405-6000. Grant, hello.
Morning. I will not be watching the hockey game tonight.
Okay, tell me why.
Because I don't want to. Because I don't have cable. Nor do I have Sportsnet.
There you go.
Online one.
Yeah.
$25 a month just for Sportsnet, and I'm not paying it.
Okay.
I'd like to watch it, and I hope Canada wins 10-0, not in overtime.
Okay.
Anyway. Regarding I think it's the Auditor General, Attorney General.
Auditor General.
I don't even know what that is, to be honest, and I don't think the general public knows what that is. it'll be forgotten by next week. I know I should probably know what that is, and I follow politics quite closely, I thought, but there's so many positions in government.
Well, Grant, you've heard the term audit. Obviously, you know what an audit is, right?
Yeah, I know what they do, I guess. I just never thought about it.
Well, an auditor general has the right and the ability to audit files and work of the government of the day, right? That's their job.
I like the sounds of it. I really like the sounds of it. I guess my point is, like, the average person, this will go in one ear and out the other because they probably don't even know what.
Yeah, unfortunately, probably it won't matter when all is said and done. But it won't be from a lack of my efforts, because I think it's an integral position. I think it's necessary. It's an important part of democracy, and I think it's an affront to democracy.
And I think what they kind of did on purpose, where they released the budget. Oh, tax break, free bridge. And then they put this in there, some bad news, and I would expect them to announce something fresh, new, and exciting over the next.
Yeah,
week.
Sure. Yeah, bury it in a day when you release a budget. You're absolutely right. That's 100%. That was calculated for sure. It was absolutely it was.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not a good position. I just don't know enough of what they do. I'm glad I'm learning about it, but I'm worried that average member of the public will not even pay attention to this news.
Okay.
Thanks for bringing it to my attention.
Okay, Grant. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Take care. Stephen, hello.
Hi.
Hi there.
Who appointed her? The Auditor General.
A previous premier would have appointed her, I do believe.
What's that, a Liberal?
Yeah, it would have been. I'm not sure who appointed Kim Adair.
So he's the head of the government, so why can't he can do what he wants to do? Maybe he wants to choose his own Auditor General. What's the big deal? It's not an end to democracy. He's the government. He can do what he wants. That's all I have
Stephen,
to say.
okay? I that's just a ridiculous comment. So I'm not even going to entertain it or talk about it because it's ridiculous. It's pretty evident what's going on. Let's see, Barry. Want to get you on quickly? I know you've been on hold. Go ahead quickly though. You got like 30 seconds or so. I know it's quick, but go ahead.
That's okay. First off, an auditor is supposed to be arm's length. He's the one that, if they finds waste and makes it public. What we're seeing is a small version of from a democracy to an autocracy, where the premier can decide whether he can let the bad news out or not. That's totally ridiculous. And in a democracy, garbage like that just does not work. And that's what it is. It's garbage.
Yeah.
That's his job, and it is arm's length. I was always taught. We had politics in school years ago, and we were told that the Auditor General was arm's length from the premier.
Yeah. Of course, it should be completely independent.
It has to be.
It has to be.
So this is ridiculous. Even they can say what they want and get away with it. That's why they do this stuff now. We're getting so lax. We're letting them do what they want. That's why the world's in a bad way.
Yeah. Okay, Barry, got to go. Thanks for the calls, everybody. Didn't get to all of you for that. I apologize. When we come back and chat with Colin Robertson, who's the Vice President and Fellow at Canadian Global Affairs Institute, and we're going to talk about the ongoing Trump tariff battle, et cetera, all that when we come back. Colin Robertson joins the show, Vice President and Fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute, former diplomat. Colin, hello. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you again, Todd.
All right. Before we get at it, any interest in this Four Nations final tonight, boss, or rather in Boston, Canada, Americans?
I'll be watching, and I'll have on my red and white.
I'll bet you will. Trump never loses an opportunity to take a shot at this country, including even this. It's just unbelievable, isn't it, at this point?
It is. His modus operandi is to disrupt and create chaos, and he is certainly doing that. And move quickly and break things, and he is succeeding. He's throwing us off balance, but as they say, keep calm and carry on.
Indeed. All right, where can we start? I guess perhaps what's going on with this Ukraine situation. And the fact that that he's calling Zelensky a dictator, I mean, it's hard to believe at this point. What are your thoughts on this?
It is hard to believe. It certainly is creating mayhem in the Western alliance, but I don't think Trump has great belief in the alliance. He sees them as a burden on the United States. He just does not recognize, which all of his predecessors as American president since the Second World War have recognized, that this is a source of strength for the United States, and it's what has sustained a world order which has brought extraordinary prosperity, lifted millions from poverty, and brought us both peace and prosperity.
Would you categorize, or is it safe to categorize Vladimir Putin and Trump as friends at this point, or allies, or how would you describe that relationship?
I think they have a similar view of the world. They believe in the old-fashioned view, which actually prevailed for centuries, of great powers dictating to small and medium-sized powers and spheres of influence. That is, there's certain areas which you can do what you like in, and certain areas what they can do what they like in. And I think Xi Jinping of China has the same view. This is something that I thought we had escaped from at the end of the Second World War, when we set up a whole series of multilateral institutions, notably the United Nations and its alphabet soup of agencies, which again, as I say, have served the cause of humanity extraordinarily well. Things like the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the World Food Program. That has done really lifted the world forward. But Trump doesn't seem to believe in it, and I don't think Mr. Putin believes in it either.
What are your thoughts on the future of NATO?
Well, without the U.S. leadership, it's going to be hard to sustain, because the U.S. provides the military might which has acted as a deterrent for initially Soviet aggression, but now aggression from Russia and China and anyone else who wants to get out of line. I mean, the Americans, with working through NATO in part, but secured the sea lanes, which 80% of world commerce goes on, and that's again created conditions for globalization, which has enriched everyone. Global South, the NATO countries, even China and Russia have benefited from the world order that we've enjoyed the last 75 years, but I'm not sure that's going to apply any longer.
All right, so having the conversation about Canadians and perhaps other NATO countries maybe doing more or contributing more, GDP percent spending for military, all of those, I don't think anybody reasonable doesn't think that those conversations couldn't be had, or these are not legitimate issues that if a sitting American president wants to raise, so be it. But I mean, to do it in the way that Trump has gone about it that goes way beyond any type of conversation about real issues that I don't have a problem with that should be discussed. Right? These aren't issues that don't bear discussion. But it's the way that he's going about it is my concern. What are your thoughts?
You're absolutely right, Todd. I completely concur with what you said. Yes, the insurance premiums have gone up, and I think we all recognize that. I think we'll be looking to be paying more for defense. 2% we talk about, but I think if we're going to secure our northern frontier in the Arctic and be able to exercise our sovereignty and do development up there, I think we're probably looking at closer to 5%, and that's what the European allies are now looking at as well. It's unfortunate. We'd much rather spend that funding on healthcare and education, but before you can do education and healthcare, you've got to have security and stability. And unfortunately, in unsettled times with countries prepared to invade others, then you need a deterrence. And that's what NATO has provided, certainly to the Western Alliance. And for a country like Canada, banding together with other like-minded countries, that gives us that strong deterrent power. And that's what I think we're all moving towards. I have no problem with the U.S. saying they carried the burden for too long and too much of the burden, and they did. They carried basically 75% of the costs. It was when it was set up in 1949, Canada was one of the founding members. The intention was to have the U.S. pay half and the rest of us pay the other half. But over time, that just fell out of whack. So I think Trump has a point in wanting to restore some balance, and I think we all should contribute to this. But the way he's going about it, as you say, is doing more harm than good.
All right, how about these last-minute deals or these last-minute concessions so that whenever the March 4th or whatever the next date is that arrives 2 days before, Trump can say, well, I'll change my mind and I'll extend it out another 30 days. I mean, we can't keep going on this yo-yo train with Trump and responding to whatever he thinks for the next 4 years. I mean, it's unsustainable. What are your thoughts?
I'm afraid that if he wants to persist, that's what we'll be doing, because keep in mind, Todd, that 75% of what we export, and it's almost that for Nova Scotians and your listeners, not quite that high, but it's still the U.S. is the biggest market for all of us, and also the market from which we import things. So it has been a deep and mutually beneficial trading relationship, which he seems determined to upset because he is at heart a mercantilist. He wants to sell but not buy. He wants to have investment in the United States, not in Canada or Mexico, for example. And he does this, and he wants to put tariffs on because he sees this as a source of revenue so that he can give Americans a tax cut, something he promised in his campaign, but he'd prefer to do it on the backs of foreigners than Americans. I don't think it'll work, but in the meantime, it's creating mayhem, certainly for our economy and for Mexico, and it's also causing uncertainty in the United States. So I think that we are right to look at countermeasures, counter tariffs, but we also have to get our own internal house in order. There are trade barriers across Canada. I saw a cartoon in the Globe the other day that showed walls around all 13 provinces and territories, and I think that's accurate. This is the unfinished business of confederation. We should be able to put our own house in order, come up with policies which serve Canadian interests, and that includes the infrastructure, making improvements at our ports like in Halifax so we can get our goods to market, building electrical grids that are secure, probably more pipelines because we've got tremendous natural resources which the world wants, not just oil and gas, but also through rail, our food and other forms of energy. Think about potash and uranium. We actually have a tremendous amount in the country, but we need to get our act together. And I'm very much encouraged by what I see by the premiers. The premiers down in Washington last week, there was some criticism of that, I think completely unfounded, going down there as a group and making the case for Canada. We need to do more of that. Premiers have to do this regionally. In the case of Nova Scotia, you've got the Atlantic Premiers and New England Governors meeting. These are a really important forum. We have better access to the United States than any other nation, but we've also got more interest in the United States than any other nation, except perhaps Mexico. But we have preferred interest because the Americans trust us much more than they do Mexico, and we can pivot off that to make our case to people who are less unbalanced than President Trump.
All right, the 51st state routine, an attack on our sovereignty, obviously. I can't recall any world leader referring to another country in that way in any instance. Can you?
Yes, well, Mr. Putin refers to Ukraine in that same fashion.
Yeah, well, there you go.
As part of Russia. So, it is extraordinary, and it's more than just a taunt now. This is something I think he profoundly believes in, because I think he wants our resources. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't want Mexico, but he looks at us and says, this is easy pickings. I think he'd like to see his picture on etched into Mount Rushmore, and he sees things in kind of 19th century terms. So it is a threat. It's something, as Mr. Prime Minister Trudeau has said, we really do have to take this seriously. Highly unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
How much resolve do you think we as a nation have to stand up to this? Because this could get, we haven't really even begun to see how difficult this could be, I think.
No, I think Prime Minister Harper got it right last week when he said it's going to inflict pain on Canada. And I think the tariffs will be applied, and I think that we will have to take it. But as I say, I'm very encouraged by what I see on the part of the premiers, because I think that we're in unsettled times while we go through transitions to a new leader of the Liberal Party, then a new Prime Minister, and then likely an election at some point, and maybe another transition. But the fact that the premiers representing different parties and different regions have come together, I think that's important because I think they're going to have to stand up more, lead trade missions abroad. I do think we need to diversify trade, and I think the level of government best suited to do that, from my own experience, again, I worked for the federal government, and but in my observation my postings abroad, particularly in the United States and in Asia, was that the level of government that probably did this best was the provincial level, and premiers leading trade delegations with a clear focus. They didn't necessarily get a lot of attention, but they were more successful than sometimes the big showy Team Canada mission, which was important for, I think, creating a sense of collegiality amongst the premiers in the federal level, which is, again, very useful. But on a kind of day-to-day basis, it's provincial interests. And again, our Constitution is set up accordingly. Trade is a shared jurisdiction, just as is immigration. Again, we need people. I think the province is taking greater interest in who comes to their province. We need talent. That's important as well. So resources, of course, are owned by the provinces. And so I think the premiers in the provinces standing up is a development I haven't seen, but I'm encouraged by what I do see. The federal government is very good at setting the frameworks, but they have to work closely with the provinces to accomplish ends which will ensure prosperity for Canadians.
Colin, appreciate your insight as always. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Colin Robertson, Vice President and Fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. A poll shows Canadians believe industrial carbon tax makes life more expensive. That when we come back. Hey, joining us for a chat, Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Franco, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, Todd, thanks for having me on today.
Oh, you got it. So a poll shows Canadians believe the industrial carbon tax makes life more expensive. Let's have a little carbon tax 101. Let's talk about the difference between the consumer-facing carbon tax and cap and trade or an industrial-type carbon tax.
Yeah, so essentially there's two federal carbon taxes, right, when you hear the term carbon tax. So number one is this consumer-facing carbon tax. It's essentially the price that you see directly when you go to the gas pumps or that you might get on your heating bill, right? So that's this consumer-facing carbon tax. And the federal government imposes a mandatory minimum. So either you have your own provincial carbon tax or the federal government hammers you with its carbon tax. Now, on the other side is what is called this industrial carbon tax. It's a hidden carbon tax on businesses like fertilizer plants, steel companies, oil and gas, things of that nature. Now, I say it's a hidden carbon tax because the cost of the carbon tax isn't directly felt or shown on your heating bill, for example, but it works in the exact same way where it drives up many of the necessities of life, whether it's gasoline, whether it's home heating bills, or whether it's groceries, by making farming more expensive. So really there's two types of carbon taxes here in Canada, the consumer-facing one and the industrial, but the effect of these carbon taxes are the same in that it makes life more expensive.
All right. Is there a percent that makes one more above the other, or are they both equally, when all is said and done, expensive?
Well, they're both expensive, right? And now the difficulties with an industrial carbon tax is that it's hidden. It's not up front. And here's one of the issues to tie it back into what's going on politically right now, right? We've heard the Liberal leadership frontrunner, Mark Carney, who says he's going to scrap the carbon tax. Well, hold on a second, because what he wants to do is he wants to remove the consumer carbon tax, the one that you directly see, but he wants to keep the industrial carbon tax, this hidden tax on businesses, which is then passed on to consumers. And you know, Mark Carney, he's trying to run on his resume of economic credibility. But unfortunately for Mr. Carney, he will not have a shred of credibility on the most important issue of affordability until he's able to show Canadians exactly what his carbon tax is going to cost us.
All right. And how might he go about doing that? How do you cost it?
Very easy. I mean, the government has costed out its current consumer carbon tax. And look, like, the government owes Canadians a duty of transparency, right? So look, if you want to run on a carbon tax, whether it's the consumer facing, whether it's a hidden industrial carbon tax on business, I think the government and whoever is going to be the next prime minister, which is what Mark Carney is running on, he has a duty to calculate it and to show Canadians exactly how much it's going to cost us.
Okay, do you think that Canadians are paying attention to this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. Because, look, the cost of living is still so expensive. And, I tuned into your last segment and I heard some of the conversations with what is going on with Mr. Trump in the U.S. and this looming tariff threat that is hanging over our economy. Well, one of the things that Canada has to do is we have to make our economy as competitive as possible, right? And both the industrial and the consumer carbon tax last year cost our economy $12 billion. Right? So that's a huge hole in our economy that our government is imposing on Canadians. And why the industrial carbon tax is so dangerous is because the U.S. doesn't have a carbon tax, right? They don't have a national carbon tax from the White House. So think about it this way. If you're a fertilizer plant here in Canada and the U.S. doesn't impose a carbon tax, but Canada does, are you going to increase production in Canada or are you going to increase production in the United States? And I think the answer to that question is pretty clear. And that's why this industrial carbon tax, along with making life more expensive, also reduces the economy and the job prospects for Canadians here at home.
Right. How long is this consumer-facing carbon tax going to remain on? Is there have we been given a timeline as to when it's going to be wound down? No, we haven't. And Todd, the consumer carbon tax is scheduled to go up April 1. Mm-hmm. That's still on the books, right? It's scheduled to go from 17 cents a liter of gasoline all the way up to 21 cents a liter of gasoline April 1. Now, here's the thing. We've heard both Mark Carney, we've heard both Chrystia Freeland say they're going to end the consumer carbon tax, but the consumer carbon tax and the tax increase is still on the books. And the way the legislation is written is that if the government was serious about ending the carbon tax, they could end it today. Even with the House of Commons being prorogued or shut down, the government could set the carbon tax rates to zero right this second. So, my question for the government is if everyone is saying that they're going to get rid of the carbon tax, then why are we still paying the carbon tax right now when we go to the gas pumps or on our heating bills? Yeah, and what's the rebate schedule going to look like, and how might we ensure that that's properly balanced?
Well, the rebates with the carbon tax, they go up hand in hand. However, as the parliamentary budget officer, and as we've discussed on the show many times, has shown definitively 3 different times, is that the carbon tax costs average households hundreds of dollars more than the rebates they get back. And just to circle back to this poll that you mentioned off the top with regards to industrial carbon taxes, what Mr. Carney is trying to get Canadians to believe is that an industrial carbon tax won't impact us. Well, the bad news for Mr. Carney is that 70% of Canadians said that businesses pass on some or most of the cost of the industrial carbon tax on the Canadians. And it makes sense, right? When you hammer refineries with carbon taxes, well, that's going to make gasoline more expensive. When you hammer utilities with carbon taxes, well, that makes home heating more expensive. When you hammer fertilizer plants with carbon taxes, that drives up the cost of production for farmers and increases the price of food that Canadians need to buy. And unfortunately for Carney, the polling gets worse because when you remove people who are undecided, it's 85% of Canadians who believe correctly that the industrial carbon tax costs will be passed on to them. And that includes majorities of voters in every single party.
Franco, always appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Hey, Todd, thanks for having me on today.
All right, take care. Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. The Toronto plane crash adds to recent accidents that may rattle travelers. We're going to talk to a psychologist about all this when we come back.
Facts.
All right, this story, Toronto plane crash adds to recent accidents that may rattle travelers, according to a psychologist. Joining us is that psychologist, Steve Joordens, psychology professor at the University of Toronto. Professor, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
It's great to be with you.
All right, so the imagery of this, and not only the imagery, of course, but in the modern age in which we all live, in which the ubiquitous nature of social media and video and YouTube and all of that, it adds to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it really amplifies, because anytime when our brain kind of considers like how risky is it to fly on an airplane, a very powerful thing is something called the availability heuristic. And that is how quickly can things come to mind to us that kind of support that, like in this case, the dangerousness of air travel. When we have an incident like this one that was covered so broadly, that was so dramatic, both in terms of the airplane landing and this imagery of being hung upside down in your chairs, those sorts of things stick in our memory very strongly. And in the future, when we're considering going on a flight, those things will come to mind, and they will lead us to feel that it's actually a much more dangerous endeavor than it really is.
All right. So, what advice do you give people who? You don't want to categorize anybody perhaps as having irrational thoughts, because thoughts are what they are, and feelings are feelings, and we get all of that. But what advice can you give people who feel perhaps overcome with anxiety, or maybe not even overcome, but are having extra anxiety over this, who have to travel, who have no choice? What advice do you give to people?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's just, acknowledge that we already live in a time where anxiety is extremely high due to all the geopolitical events and climate change and all the other things we're living through. We're all already sort of on a level of anxiety where we're just, not panicked, but close. And now something like this, finding that, I do have to travel, but I actually don't feel comfortable about it. That's absolutely a real feeling, and it's a natural brain reaction to potential threat. So what do you do about it if you have to fly? There are certain approaches. So one of the notions is when you have to sort of directly confront anxiety, the first trick is not to focus on the anxiety, not to say, I don't want to be anxious, but rather to focus on its opposite. And its opposite is relaxation. And so you can go to YouTube channels, for example, and look at guided relaxation. It'll walk you through this process you can use to kind of put your body in a really relaxed state. And when you get to know that state, when you get comfortable with that process of getting there, you can start to use this as a skill, so that when you feel anxiety coming on, you can say, okay, I want to go to this relaxed space. I know how to get there. I know how it feels. But it takes some practice. You have to spend the time kind of learning how to get there. But things like guided relaxation can really help you with that.
All right. And statistically, like I said, the chances of an accident are astronomically against it. I think I'm looking at the numbers here, 1 in 13.7 million or something like that. But if somebody has a fear, an irrational fear, and again, I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, irrational or not, but if somebody has these feelings, spewing statistics or citing statistics probably isn't going to get it done, or maybe it will. What are your thoughts?
Well, not so much. So we are really all two people. We are that rational part of us. That's our frontal lobes. That's the new kid in town in our brain, the newly evolved region. But it sits on top of very primitive limbic system. And that limbic system is where a lot of our emotional responses come from. And while we might say it's irrational, really the only reason it's become irrational is because these events get so amplified by media, by social media. It's like that plane crash happened 50 times. Mm-hmm. So it was really only one crash statistically. But in as far as what our brain has seen that crash over and over and over and over again. And that's what our brain is using to kind of compute what it thinks the risk is. And so really, it's just doing what it does. There's nothing wrong with people that feel this anxiety. It is a function of what happens. But yeah, if you can kind of get an understanding of why it's happening and how you can manage it. And I will mention one other thing. I created a course during COVID to help people understand anxiety, and it's available on Coursera.org. It's free, completely free online course if they search mind control, which sounds kind of whatever, but it's about learning to control your mind. And I think it's a skill we all need in this world we live in, to really understand why we get anxious, and then to understand what it is we can do to exert some level of control over that reaction.
And of course, I mean, the whole concept of flying it boggles the mind, and to the average person, we think of the skill set that is required, and we often project ourselves in that cockpit and then having no clue what to do. Or it's not like driving a car. We can all understand the concept of driving a car. So I think that the whole concept of flight in and of itself is part of it, of perhaps having disbelief that anybody can do this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of, dare I say, magic, when we look up in the sky and we see something that weighs as much as an airplane does, somehow staying up in the air and moving forward instead of falling like a brick. Our sort of conscious mind thinks this shouldn't work. And, unless you really understand aerodynamics, it seems sort of wondrous. And so that means we can very quickly, because we don't really understand it that well, we can very quickly come to incorrect interpretations. And especially, if we think that should be falling out of the sky, it's really easy to push us in a direction where we might start thinking, yeah, that might be exactly what's happened. And every plane crash we see, that's what it kind of reinforces. Like, people tell you this is fine, this is safe, but look over here, wasn't safe this time. And our brain is, one of the things our brain does is continuously scan for threat, basic survival mechanism. But when it does see these examples of threat, it attends to them and it alters our behavior in the future. And one of the ways it does that is through this anxiety mechanism. Professor, interesting. Appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this. Thank you very much. All right, take care. Fantastic day, everyone. You as well. Take care. Steve Joordens, psychology professor at the University of Toronto. A couple of things when we come back, including giving away some Mooseheads tickets. We'll be back. All right, before I chat with my next guest, we have 2 sets of tickets for the Mooseheads hosting Victoriaville tomorrow, or Saturday, rather. If you'd like the tickets, be callers 4 and 6 now at 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. If you'd like these tickets, 2 sets of tickets, Halifax hosting Victoriaville on Saturday, 902-405-6000. And good luck. All right, now the nationwide search for art is coming to Halifax. Rob Cowley joins us to talk about all of this, Canadian art specialist and president of Cowley Abbott. Rob, thanks for joining the show.
It's a pleasure. How are you, Todd?
I'm well. Yourself?
Very good.
Excellent. So tell us about what people can expect here.
Well, we're going to be at the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia this Sunday, February 23rd from 11 to 4. You can make an appointment just by writing to us at rsvp@cowleyabbott.ca. And so we're offering 15-minute appointments. Clients can bring up to 3 works of art. With that, they also provide a donation to the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia. And we are here to assist with providing valuations and any information we can related to artwork that people may have in their collection.
All right. What might people bring? Like what do you think people should be? They're going in their mind thinking right now, what should I bring? What are some suggestions?
Well, our focus is fine art, and so typically we're looking at paintings, prints, works on paper, some sculpture as well. Certainly anything like that. That's our specialty at Cowley Abbott, and so that's what we can assist with. All right.
How about how many unknown or how many hidden treasures do you think are out there?
There's a lot. I mean, we still see a fair number of artworks where clients come in and show us something they're not sure the value of, and we're able to provide details. We're in Charlottetown today doing this, and we've already seen works that are valued in the tens of thousands of dollars. So it's a lot more. It happens. Obviously, it doesn't happen as often as works that have limited value, but it certainly does happen regularly on these days that we hold across Canada.
All right. What tips do you give people if they're thinking about maybe I should or shouldn't show up with whatever? What tips, advice do you give people when it comes to evaluating these things?
Number one, if you can read if there's a signature, if you can read the artist's name, or if there's a label on the back with the artist's name, you can always go online and just look up the artist and see if it is an artist that is known, and if it's an artist that trades regularly, if you can tell that. From there, also, if it is a well-known artist, taking a look at the image to see if maybe it's a reproduction. Artists like Maud Lewis, certainly, and members of the Group of Seven and Emily Carr, they are such well-known artists that, of course, reproductions have been produced of their work. those reproductions tend to have limited value. So if your artwork is, an A.Y. Jackson and you see that the painting itself is in the National Gallery of Canada, that's the same image, chances are the artwork's going to have a limited value because it is a reproduction of the artist's work.
All right. What about Google searches when people see things? Are there things that they can check out on Google, or is that sometimes a trapdoor?
No, it can give you general information. It will not take the place of an art expert. And that's something we're always happy, to provide our services to clients, either in person or remotely. But it is helpful for general information, finding out if an artist is a known artist. But also, like I said, if you do have a scene by an artist and you look on Google image search, if you see that same scene repeated several times, then there's a high probability they have a print. So Google can be helpful, definitely.
All right. What about how to detect frauds?
That's a bit more difficult, and it depends on the artist. In those cases, you should speak to an expert, because those experts will either have some knowledge themselves of the artist and what they created, and also what to look for with forgeries, or those experts like ourselves can often, if we don't know, we can also reach out to those recognized experts in the work of artists like Maud Lewis or the Group of Seven, or but always best to speak to an expert about that.
All right. So of all the things that you see, what percent do you think is got some value?
I would say probably 25%, maybe even a bit more. Many times we will see works that have value that might be, a couple of $1,000s, all the way up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I would say that it does happen. I would say, 1 in 3, 1 in 4 works have value.
Okay. And so just again, a reminder of the date and the time and all that jazz. It's coming up this weekend, correct?
Yes, the valuation day is this Sunday, February 23rd, from 11 to 4 at the Art Gallery, Nova Scotia. You do need an appointment, so it's rsvp@cowleyabbott.ca, and we'll be more than happy. If we are fully booked, we can still accommodate you remotely through email, so we're more than happy to see people on that day. And again, there is a donation required to the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia as part of the session. And then we also are, I should mention as well, on Tuesday, February the 25th at 2:30, we're offering a free art talk to talk about the market, the auction market, and the art market, and that'll be at the Marion McCain Building at Dalhousie University.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate your time. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much, Todd. Take care.
All right, take care. Rob Cowley, Canadian art specialist and president of Cowley Abbott. All right, now joining us for a chat, something pretty interesting coming up, is Josh McJannett of Dominion City Brewing. Josh, hello. How are you?
Great to be with you, Todd. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. So indie brewers banding together to support local and build a stronger Canada. Tell us about all of this.
Yeah, it's an exciting day. So we're based here in Ottawa, and we had the idea to band together with breweries from coast to coast to coast, including in Nova Scotia, to brew a 100% Canadian beer, relying only on local Canadian ingredients, and all of us together to donate a portion of the proceeds from these beers that we're selling to support organizations, not-for-profits, charities that make the country stronger. So ours is the first beer to come out today, and we announced a lineup of brewers from every region, small independent brewers who are committed to their communities, who are going to brew this recipe with us over the coming weeks and really try to make a wave of good in a moment that feels kind of dire.
Yeah, for sure. It's a time of unity and a time for needed unity as well. And why not with beer, right? That's always a good way to come together, right?
You know what? That's the thing, man. Is I'm just a guy who operates a small brewery, but we have an opportunity to be a small light in a dark room, and I think that's what these people who run these breweries in their community, North Brewing in Halifax and Dartmouth, have joined the campaign. Their beer will be available in the weeks and months ahead. It really means a lot, and it's cool to see folks banding together, acting like a country at a moment like this.
And independent breweries, of course, there's small businesses, but there's so much upside, right? Local hires, local entrepreneurs. There's just no end to the upside there, right?
We're like the firemen running into the burning building. Not many people are opening small manufacturing in small communities from coast to coast to coast, but that's what breweries have been doing in Canada for a while now. And we really are manufacturing businesses. We create blue collar jobs and we make stuff, and that's actually pretty uncommon. So I think it's neat that we find a way to harness the power of local beer. We're so connected to our communities and the people who support us you have an opportunity to take what we do and give back at this moment.
Okay, so is there any line where people can learn more about the efforts here?
Yeah, absolutely. Head to gloriousandfree.beer today, and there's information there about the campaign. We've got breweries from coast to coast to coast involved now. We want more, so there's an opportunity there. If you're listening and you operate a brewery or you know someone who does, we'd love to get you involved. We're making our recipe and our suppliers available to everybody. And then if you're a consumer and you're looking for some action you can take, these breweries everywhere across Canada are going to be selling this beer in the days and weeks ahead. Find them, support them, do something good.
Okay, Josh, appreciate it. Good luck.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks. Take care. Josh McJannett, Dominion City Brewing. All right, some information as we head to the top of the hour and to the end of the show. The outgoing federal heritage minister says she wants to bar CBC Radio Canada from running ads during programming and from charging subscription fees for digital products such as CBC Gem. In turn, the government will release public broadcasters' funding and make it more sustainable. Heritage Minister Pascal Saint-Onge, who released the plan for revising CBC Radio Canada's mandate Friday, says the public funding the broadcaster receives is about half the G7 average for national public broadcasters, and she would like to bring it more in line with other countries. The minister also says to enshrine the importance of delivering impartial news coverage in the CBC's mandate. But Saint-Onge isn't likely to have time to implement her plan with the election likely to come this spring. Saint-Onge says she will not run in that election, adding she is a new mom to be present in the early years of her child's life. So, yeah, you can be rest assured, folks, that if you are at the CBC, you probably don't want to see, I shouldn't say this, but a Pierre Poilievre government. Certainly a majority government, because they have vowed to dismantle basically the CBC, not Radio Canada, but the CBC. So anyway, listen, I watched a lot of these political shows, including, of course, Power and Politics. Tim Powers is on Power and Politics, and Rosemary Barton, and a lot of their political shows. And I find, it's just my own personal point of view, the political shows are pretty fair, I must say. I think that they do their best to balance it out. When it comes to pundits on the show, I don't think it's over the top. And when they have MPs on, members of Parliament, they have panels, they do their level best to have representation from all the parties. That's just my takeaway. Now, is the CBC perfect? Of course not. And sure, it has its challenges, obviously. And at the corporate level, I think that the waste is egregious, and the fact that corporate bonuses are handed out at a time when journalists have been laid off, I think is wrong also. So there's lots to improve when it comes to the CBC, that's for sure. But complete dismantling of the Crown Corporation, I'm not a supporter of, despite the fact that we compete with the CBC directly. The federal government's fiscal watchdog says a guaranteed basic income program at the federal level could cut poverty rates in Canada by up to 40%. In a new report, the parliamentary budget officer says that a Canadian family in the lowest earning group could expect to receive an average of $6,100 in annual disposable income through such a program, although reductions in poverty rate vary provincially. Efforts to establish a basic national income in Canada have been met with mixed success. Newfoundland and Labrador launched a basic income pilot for older adults last year, and another program for people with disabilities is set to begin in July. My main issue and concern with this, look, I want to see everybody with more. Why not? But the challenge is inflation with this. It just, to my simple brain, that if people en masse all have $1,000 more a month or $1,500 or whatever the number is, then that is going to impact the cost of everything. Everything's going to cost more money because you got more money to spend in the economy. That's kind of economics 101, I think. But anyway, this is a debate that'll be continued to go on, I'm sure, for many, many years to come. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it very much. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness on the other side of the glass of the control board. Doing a fine job as always. We're back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. See you then.